16. No, it's 5. Welcome to review. Hold on. Well, how do I switch it? I can't. But there are other people here, and we have all different topics today. Native Americans in the West, Reconstruction, New Deal, Carter, First Red Scare, Reagan, Watergate, chart of first progressives in 18. Okay, that person didn't come to the review before, and the French and Indian War. Okay, that's a lot. But we will do our best. And I think we should start with the Great Depression and the New Deal, because that has popped up a couple times as one that people want to go over. Does that sound good, guys? Okay, awesome. See, there are people here. I told you. For their identity purposes, we will protect them. When we talk about the Great Depression, we know that like a big cause is just the 20s, right? And like everything we do during the 20s. And we said our purchasing raises an eyebrow, because how are we purchasing things? We are buying things on credit, and that both goes to stocks and to actual consumer goods. What kind of consumer goods? Give me some. A kitchen piano. A house.
Washing machines, dryers.
A car, right? Not quite as we would know them today, but not like mechanical ones we would recognize today. Definitely cars, radios, right? All these different things. We're buying way too many of them. And because we're buying way too many of them with our credit, pretty soon those credit card bills come. And again, we don't actually have credit cards, but for us to understand. And we realize we cannot keep spending this way, even though it's really being encouraged. It's also really encouraged that we invest in stocks. And because the stock market literally is quadrupling in value in the 20s, we think it's never going to stop. So what do? We keep buying. Do we do our homework?
No.
We don't, which is something called
Speculation.
Well, yeah, that too. But speculation, where we don't research our companies. Again, if this is your money, you should be researching what's going on, right? And then we also buy on a margin. And what is buying on a margin?
Buying a part of the stock and saying that you'll pay the rest back, but not having the rest.
Exactly. We just think, oh my God, it's going to quadruple in value, so I can pay this back fantastically. Who really cares? But the problem is when the stock market starts to decrease, and when it falls, we said it falls, right? It falls far because it was so high. People cannot pay their stockbrokers. Stockbrokers cannot pay who? Who do they borrow money from? Bad news. They borrowed it from banks, and banks were getting this money from
The Federal
Federal Reserve. Is supposed to be watching over us, making sure that we're making the right call. We also at this time have a really big gap between the rich and the poor. The gap between our classes is huge, right? What other causes for the Great Depression? What's the big one? We have all this stuff, and America at the end of the day just stops buying. Overproduction and underconsumption, right? This is the big one. Overproduction and underconsumption. So this all sets us up perfectly for what major event that happens on a Tuesday? Black Tuesday, right? So first, the stock market is going to crash on Black Tuesday. And we said this really, in large part, happens because of panic, right? It's too low now. See, this is why I need a professional. Help me out. On Black Tuesday, we said the stocks start to falter a little bit, Morgan. And when they falter a little bit, then people panic and they go to sell their stock. And when everyone goes to sell their stock at the same time, just like we did with Jenga, what happens?
Everything collapses.
Everything collapses because it needs to be a healthy give and take. It needs to be balanced. When everyone goes to dump it at the same time, people think, oh my God, what's wrong with it, right? Harlene, question?
People go to the bank, right?
That's coming. People do go to the bank. 1 second. So people lose a lot of money, and again, their stock becomes devalued, right? It loses value. It's not like anyone's robbing money, but the stock for these businesses that were faltering a little bit, now investors pull out, the stock drops more, the business does even worse. Also, people are not buying things off their shelves, and when people aren't buying your stuff as a business, you have to lay people off. When people become unemployed and they lose their money in the stock market, where do they go, Harlene? They go to the bank, they say, my goodness, I'm so glad I sold my money in the bank. But everyone has this thought, and everyone panics, and everyone goes to the bank at the same time, and banks are going to close. These bank runs freak banks out, they close down, and we know later not all of them open up again, right? So I think we covered a lot of our reasons for this Great Depression. How does Hoover react? He doesn't do much, right? Hoover is doing this thing where he's like, come on, it's going to get better, stick together, just start spending again. But people are really panicked. And this is something that really devastates a lot of people. And this whole like grin and bear it, it'll get better soon isn't working. But again, classic what Republican? Classic laissez-faire Republican. And he is right. The economy does need to fix itself. We need to become confident in the economy again, spend that money. But people are not going to do that because they're so terrified. And again, we talked about the people that never return money to the banks, keep it under their mattress, keep it in their walls. People are really freaked out. So Hoover doesn't do much. We know that he has the Reconstruction Finance Corporation. He's going to try to encourage people, not make them, but encourage people. Hey, Judy-Ann, we're being filmed, just so you know. Not really, I'm being filmed.
Oh.
And he also builds the Hoover Dam, and that shows that you can have building projects that can give people jobs and make money, but people are saying,
More.
it's not enough. Give us more. And like, I'm hungry in Boston or Texas or California, and you built a big old dam in the middle of Nevada, and that has not changed my life. So please do something. So then we know the election of 1932.
32.
Who comes in?
FDR.
FDR comes in. What does he promise?
New Deal.
We have just had a laissez-faire Republican who is not doing a lot in the lives of the American people to help with the Great Depression. Now we want a hands-on Democrat. Just take it, Morgan. And he is going to give us this new deal. And again, this deal is between us and him. So let's get alphabet soupy. Let's do it.
CCC.
Okay, what's CCC?
Civilian
Conservation Corps. The Civilian Conservation Corps is going to address the most pressing unemployment needs. It's for men ages 18 to 25. And it's almost like a barrack-style settlement where people are living near the project, whether it's building a park, building a community center, and they're sending their money back home. Keep going.
AAA.
Yes. What?
Agricultural something.
Agricultural
and
Adjustment Act.
Act.
Nina, I'm so sorry I can't see you. Are you
That's
okay?
I'm good.
The Agricultural Adjustment Act is to help farmers who have been suffering all through the 20s, right? All through the 20s and also now definitely in the 1930s. And what does he do? It's kind of genius, even though it's going to be declared as illegal later on by the Supreme Court. Alyssa?
He gives subsidies to farmers to keep lands barren so
Yes.
that they can fix the surplus.
If our problem is overproduction, this is going to say, hey, don't grow all your stuff, leave some fallow, don't plant some if you've already, started, then leave it fallow. And we will give you a subsidy from taxpayer money to make up for that stuff that you are not growing. Question, Aaliyah? No?
Nope.
All right. Keep going.
TVA.
NRA sometimes, but we know it as the NIRA. And again, 1930s, if you see NRA, it's referring to the National Recovery Act. If you see NRA today, it's referring to National Rifle Association, right? So always look at the year again. What this stands for? National Industrial Recovery Act, right? And this is mostly to give people jobs. It's going to force some companies to work together on things like wages and price points, right? But then the big part of it, tons of building projects, whether they're schools, the Delaware S-curves, Buffalo Zoo, Kleinhans Music Hall. This is all part of what? Public Works Association, right? PWA, sometimes you see it, WPA, Works Progress Association. We said this is everyone from artists that paint murals like Diego Rivera to money that goes to all kinds of construction, electricians, right? All different people that are building this, and it provides so many actual jobs, and we know we're surrounded by tons of New Deal architecture because of it, right? Okay, keep going. TVA stands for Tennessee Valley Authority, not just in cities, but in areas that are poor, like in the Tennessee Valley in the south. You need dams, you need all different kinds of bridges, infrastructure. It gives those people jobs. Keep going. REA is Rural Electrification Act. Say it, electrification. You just did it. You just did it. Rural Electrification Act is going to give electricity to rural areas. They still don't have it. Shocking numbers of people still don't have it. And again, it's creating jobs and it's improving people's lives. Keep going.
The Social Security?
Okay, for sure, Social Security, right? That's okay. Social Security, again, a government subsidy given to people ages over 65 and over. And we said the clincher is, what's life expectancy when you pass this? 65. And that has definitely changed, and baby boomers are taking all of our Social Security. You heard me. This is on YouTube. That's right. What else? Keep going. What about the CWA? That provides winter employment, right? Because we said you have to work in subways and other stuff in Buffalo, hard pressed to do building projects outside all year long, right? Keep going. Lizzie?
Wait, so CWA, what does that stand for?
Civil Works Administration,
Okay, thank you.
I think. If someone could double check it, that'd be
Sounds right.
wonderful.
You can go with that.
What else? What else? There's more. There's more. What about the FDIC? Carlene's favorite topic, banks. FDIC.
Federal.
Oh, it's Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. This is all part of the bank holiday where the banks are shut down, only the healthy ones reopen. He needs to encourage people to come back into banks and put their money in. So it says you will get your money up to $250,000. Morgan, we got an answer?
CWA is Civil Works Administration.
I think that's what I said. Civil
Yeah.
Works Administration. Great. Thank you, Morgan. Julianne?
Is the SEC something?
The SEC is definitely something for you Wolf of Wall Street fans. Everything else, Martha Stewart, insider trading, they are the ones that have the smackdown. What does it stand for? Securities and Exchange Commission. They are the government watchdog over the stock market. Government watchdog over the stock market. So again, we're looking at all our mistakes in the 20s and early 30s, and we're trying to correct them. And we're also trying to make people feel good and confident and secure about the economy again so that they spend. And people are much more likely to spend if they have these jobs. Now again, limits of New Deal jobs, if you were a minority, you were probably fresh out of luck. Because even though FDR has so much in ways of helping minorities, with the Black Cabinet, Mary McLeod Bethune, all this stuff, a lot of these are handed out at the state level. And if there's one job left for the TVA in Tennessee, and someone's black and someone's white, who's getting the job? The white person is getting the job, right? Also, these are not really for women, they don't really pay well, and they're not for long term, but there's something. And again, we're gonna feel good again. Remember we looked at that Forgotten Man cartoon, FDR is remembering people. He's also communicating and telling us about all this through the
Fireside chat.
fireside chats. You got it. Miss Morgan.
Oh, no.
You sure? Okay. Guys, I think we covered a lot of the New Deal. What do you think? And it's all lovely, but what ends the Great Depression? World War II. Nina?
What was the thing during the bank holiday when they sent people to go look at the banks?
That was the Emergency Banking Act.
Okay.
Yep. Any other questions on the New Deal? I think we covered a lot. And again, just have some of these in your back pocket. So I'm going to get rid of where it says New Deal. Give me the other deals. Who said Square Deal?
That's Teddy Roosevelt.
That's Teddy Roosevelt. Who said Fair Deal?
Oh.
Harry Truman. And of course, New Deal is between us and FDR. Okay. What next, you guys? Did someone just say who is Truman?
No, I said what was it?
Okay. Don't have time for that.
Native Americans in the West.
Let's do Native Americans in the West. So we can literally do actually the history of Native Americans and our treatment of them moving from one side of our country to the other, right? We know it's just going to continue. This treatment just intensifies and concentrates over time, and it is completely horrific. So when we, as the colonists in Great Britain, win the French and Indian War, let's do that actually really quickly. French and Indian War starts in 1754 and ends in 1763. It is between what two major European powers?
France and Britain.
Britain and France. They both team up with different Native American tribes on either side, and Native American tribes that choose them are hoping to do so in order to get a lot of their land back, right? And we know that after the French Indian War, Revolution, and the War of 1812, they do not, and that power just continues to decrease. So lots of this fighting is done, of course, in our neck of the woods, and we know that we live in a deciduous tree area, and we have furry little creatures. It's about the fur trade. It's about control mostly of North America, but it's about the fur trade. So lots of fighting happens around your fort, right? You would have this fort, and it did the whole surrounding area because it's such a wilderness, right? America's really a melting pot at this time. It's a wilderness. We have lots of different tribes, people, the Dutch, all this stuff, all the different treaties. Remember that time period? Think Last of the Mohicans, written by James Fenimore Cooper. Nice. So it was all about the forts. Lots of battles around which forts? Fort Ticonderoga, Fort Niagara, right? Fort Duquesne. And we know the British are not doing well in the beginning, but then they're going to surge ahead and they are going to win. And when this happens, they get all land from the Mississippi to the East Coast. And what treaty gives them this? In 1763, the Treaty of Paris. So they get all of this, and then there's settlers here. We want to go more west. And there's always conflict between us and the Native Americans. And I shouldn't say us, between colonists and the Native Americans. Because, again, the British come in with tons of people and they want land. And we know the French are different. The French come in as traders, often as bachelors, living with the tribes, right? The Dutch are just really about consumption and getting the fur trade. The British come in with families. Think about people like Anne, what's her face, do you remember?
Pollard. Tons of kids.
Anne, what's her last name?
Pollard.
Pollard, yes, Anne Pollard, absolutely. Remember, she had all the children and like 100 and some living descendants. Yeah. So you can see how that creates land tensions. So the British draw a line pretty much in the Appalachian Mountains. What rhymes with Appalachian? Proclamation of 1763, same year as the Treaty of Paris. And they say, Native Americans, you must go west. Colonists, you stay here so we can keep an eye on you after we almost lost you in the French-Indian War. Okay? This is the beginning, just the beginning of Native Americans getting pushed west. And if we look later on, come the 1830s, we know that down here, these groups of Native Americans also get pushed to Oklahoma through the Indian Removal Act, and Andrew Jackson forces them on the Trail of Tears, right? This terrible genocide. And it just keeps going. We know in this area, in the Northwest Territories, you have lots of fighting, whether it's with Chief Little Turtle or later with Tecumseh. You continually have these battles like the Battle of Fallen Timbers. We talked about that. So you can just see we're encroaching more and more and more over. And by the time we get here, this is our time when we would call like the Indian Wars and Native Americans in the West. We are now dealing with people that want this land. What has brought a lot of settlers out here? White settlers. What laws? The Homestead Act. Keep going. Pacific Railway Act, right? They want to farm there. They want their dugouts. They want their soddies, right? We have McCormick combine harvesters, John Deere, all these things that are making it easy for them to plow and everything. And you have Native American tribes that live there. So you have this big now showdown between these tribes that are struggling to stay alive, many of whom have been pushed. We talked about the Crow tribe, a tribe that was over here originally in our neck of the woods way back, that now has been living here. Another example, too, of interaction with Native Americans and mistreatment is, of course, Lewis and Clark, right? We remember that in their journals, how they would write like lots of ethnocentrism and everything else. So now we have all these different tribes here, and whether they're the Cheyenne, whether they are, the Nez Perce, you have all these different tribes and lots of conflict. What are some of these terrible battles, massacres, etc. that happen? Come again? Bleeding Kansas. Sand Creek Massacre, definitely Wounded Knee. Where does Wounded Knee take place? Wounded Knee is going to be in South Dakota. It's where the current day Pine Ridge Indian Reservation is, right? That site. And do you guys remember what tribe?
The Sioux?
Yeah, so we're dealing with the Sioux, and we're looking at different names here. Sometimes they're called the Sioux, sometimes, as we saw in that Aaron Huey video, Lakota, right? So you have many different tribes that are in this region, and it is just an all-out massacre. It is terrible, right? And then this just becomes more or less what's going on. Geronimo is going to be more in the American Southwest, we said. They continue to get pushed out. These are people like General Custer. This is the American Army. This is orders for them to act this way and behave this way. And it's just awful. We talk about things like Chivington with, that wasn't Sand Creek, was it? Chivington in Colorado? Morgan, do you mind looking it up for us?
Oh.
Chivington, General Chivington. Either way, we know it's such a tragic and unfortunately reinforced story of mistreatment over time. Sand Creek Massacre, perfect. Definitely not perfect, but we were correct. So this is going to continue, and then we know after Wounded Knee and Trail of Tears are seen as like the two most tragic events often in Native American history. And after this, we know there's just going to be these outposts, but lots of people then are going to attach themselves to a spiritual movement. And this movement from Wovoka, who's a shaman, is called ghost dance. And ghost dance is like this belief if this dance is done, then people will be brought back and finally get their land back and everything else. But the American government sees it as what? They see it as an uprising, and they are going to go to arrest the one person who successfully had this big battle, the Battle of Little Bighorn, and what's his name? Chief Sitting Bull. And they go after Sitting Bull, and they go to arrest Sitting Bull, and what happens? Sitting Bull is killed when the arrest is attempted, and then all these other, basically prisoners of war, are brought to this camp at Wounded Knee, and when that happens, then they are just brutally massacred. So we know that this is followed by the Dawes Act, and this is to split up tribes and basically make sure that people cannot live with their community, to kind of bleed that strength even more. And you and I looked at that one painting, and it was Native American people literally on the coast, right? And we said this is just indicative of this pushing constantly. And we know, we talked about what do we do with this today, right? This is still one of like the saddest and most unresolved issues from our history because it went on for so long, right? From the moment you had people come in the 1400s, just for so long, continual reinforced treatment, awful. Any questions on that? Alyssa, does that satisfy that time period? Okay. So we just knocked off 2. Nice. Native Americans in the West, French and Indian War. Gosh, what do you guys want to do?
Reconstruction.
Post-Reconstruction?
Reconstruction.
Carter and Reagan.
Okay.
Carter and Reagan. Yeah, let's go Carter and Reagan because like a lot of people in here.
All right, so let's go in order. Let's do Watergate, let's do Reagan, and then, nope, just kidding. Let's do Watergate, Carter, and Reagan. Okay? Does that sound okay? Very quickly? Yeah? Sounds perfect. So Richard Nixon is president, and we know that he wins that election of 1972, and it's because Henry Kissinger says we are this close to ending what major war? We are this close to ending Vietnam, so stay with us, please. And he is going to be reelected in, even though people thought that he wouldn't be, because what amendment just changed the voting age from 21 to 18, the 26th Amendment, right? So Richard Nixon does win, but then we find out he was up to some shenanigans when he was campaigning, mostly wiretapping the Democratic National Convention offices in this big office complex and hotel place called Watergate. What kind of architecture is Watergate? Brutalism. Nice. Ugly. I think it's ugly. I think it's a very ugly structure. So Watergate, this security guard is going around and he sees tape on the door. And when he sees tape on the door, he comes back and then he sees tape on the door again. And then he goes in and he sees this very awkward burglary happening. Someone is either installing or removing tapes from these offices, aka the people that Nixon would most like to know what they were talking about when they were campaigning against him in 1972, because Nixon's a Republican, right? So when this happens, this investigation is brought forward, and 2 young Washington Post journalists are going to push this, try to make their name, and also they smell of fish. Carl Bernstein and Bob Woodward, right? And they also have a source within the U.S. government, and it's just going to be referred to as Deep Throat. And we said it wasn't up until a couple years that this guy then revealed his identity. So when this happens, Richard Nixon says, I'll investigate, I've got this. No. We said it's like you naming your own punishment for breaking curfew. That makes no sense, right? So then an outside investigator is brought in, and his name is Archibald Cox. And when he comes in, he, like a natural instinct, says, hey, Richard Nixon, give me the tapes. And Richard Nixon says, no. And then Richard Nixon tries to fire him, and it takes 2 people fired. Finally, the 3rd assistant down to the Attorney General is going to fire Archibald Cox. When this happens, we said Nixon looks completely guilty, right? The Supreme Court gets involved. It's U.S. versus Nixon. There's going to be a subpoena for the tapes. He hands them over. There's big chunks missing. And all of this is going to give us a huge distrust in the government, especially when Gerald Ford does what? Right away. Pardons him. And we said his Vice President, Spiro Agnew, can't be president because he was indicted for tax fraud. So again, this is just like, terrible, right? So then, after all this, when Jimmy Carter comes in, is a born-again Christian who's a peanut farmer with a special needs daughter, and he's squeaky clean, and he says, America will never lie to you. Do we love it?
Yeah.
We love it. We love it. So let's do some buzzwords for Carter. By far, one of the most important positive things he does in his administration, Camp David Accords, right? Camp David Accords is going to be huge, that he brings Egypt and Israel together, and they both get a Nobel Peace Prize for their efforts in peace in the Middle East. He's also going to do some things that have mixed signals, like he gives the Panama Canal back to Panama, and some people say, that was too far. Even though Nixon visited and opened up China, what does Carter do? He officially recognizes China, and some people said, they're still communist. What else does he do? He does not respond with strength when it comes to the Iranian hostage crisis. He also is not going to respond as people would want him to when the USSR invades Afghanistan. He instead boycotts the Olympics and says, we will not send wheat to you. That is not the sign of strength people are looking for. He does start the Department of Energy. He is going to be all about human rights. But then, coupled with the savings loan crisis, when he says, you have a crisis of confidence, America, we say, psh, we don't, you do, we're voting you out. Who do we vote in?
Reagan.
Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan's domestic policy Again, he does not help with the AIDS crisis. He does not really pay attention to this as he should have. And it's all about supply side or Reaganomics. What is he doing?
Trickle down.
Trickle down, right? He's doing lots of tax cuts. This is the time when we said not a lot of regulation in the stock market, all this stuff. And when it comes to his foreign policy, he is super tough on the Soviet Union. But it's easier to be tough on the Soviet Union because they are running out of money. Communism is tough to keep economically afloat for them, right? So what does Ronald Reagan do? What are some Cold War policies of his? Mr. Gorbachev, tear down that wall. He gives these like really impassioned speeches about it. What else? He wants to build what in the sky? The SDI, right? Strategic Defense Initiative, right? And later on, people joke and call it Star Wars because how ridiculous, they're going to build a shield over our country. What else? What else does he do? He gets a little money laundering with the Iran.
Contra.
The Iran-Contra affair, kind of like Watergate. This is never fully looked into. People are not really satisfied by this. And again, it's a time to be president when you have a lot of prosperity in America in the 1980s. And people remember him for that. But he actually explodes our deficit, makes it super, super big because he spends so much money on the military. So that is Ronald Reagan. And most of all, he is confident. He is not Jimmy Carter. And he says, I'm going to help out with our economy. So that's why we elect him in. Yep.
Was he also with the New Conservative?
Yes, thank you. New conservatism, new right. We talked about how a lot of these issues are being coupled with religion. This is in reaction to a lot of these things like forced busing integration in the 1960s and 70s that lots of people didn't like. So you see this major rise of the Republican Party, new conservatism, and the new right. Morgan?
Can we talk about the new right?
Yes, absolutely. What would you like to talk about it? Everything about the new right. Let's do it. So, for and against, well, no, this is a bad way to do it, actually. New right. Let's first talk about what they were against.
Like abortion.
Yep. Abortion and that stuff. Not always. I'm not going to include that one.
Like the
Yep.
High taxes.
Forced busing. A lot of liberal social issues. Someone spending money like Medicare, Medicaid, stuff like that. That wouldn't necessarily be something that they would like. Usually against women's lib, usually against civil rights, stuff like that. So what are they for? Usually against gun control. What are they for?
Guns.
Yep.
No taxes.
Not gun control. Definitely cutting taxes. Again, there's a tie of Christianity in here. Definitely military spending. They are going to not like a lot of civil rights. If you guys have to go, go ahead. No problem. See you later. Bye. Morgan, does that satisfy you?
Yes.
Think about a lot of our liberal social movements from the 60s and 70s, and then this is like a backswing. Okay? Watergate, Reagan, first Red Scare, we'll just rifle through. What's going on there? First Red Scare.
After World War I.
Bolshevik Revolution after World War I in 1917 makes us really freaked out because we are a capitalist country all about our privacy and our individual property and stuff like that. And then comes this thing that is the antithesis of all the things we believe in at home. So we get really freaked out and we convince ourselves that this is a big problem in our country, even though it's quite not. Where we have evidence of spydom in the second Red Scare, we really don't in the first Red Scare, right? So how do we respond? A. Mitchell Palmer's going to have the Palmer raids. What else? How does labor do during the first Red Scare? They do not do very well. How about any immigrant, especially from Eastern Europe? Lots of deporting, lots of quota acts, stuff like that, lots of nativism. Yeah, you could couple Sacco and Vanzetti in with this. They're Italian. It's not so much about communism, but a severe distrust of foreigners after World War I. Remember, we don't join the League of Nations because we're scared of this, right? So that's kind of like a 2-second nutshell of the first Red Scare. Chart of the progressive movement in the 1800s and second progressive. So we did that already. Who wanted that?
It was me, I'm sorry.
That was you?
But it's okay.
We could do it really quickly. So 1800s and then 1900s. We know that we're fighting for abolition in the 1800s. What does that look like here? NAACP and Niagara movement. We know we're fighting for the women's movement in Seneca Falls and everything in the reform era in the 1800s. What does that look like here?
Suffrage.
Alice Paul fighting for suffrage, etc. We know that we're fighting for Education at this time, what does that look like over here? We know it's horseman and everything here.
Ground versus.
1900s progressive era.
Oh.
We know that we're against child labor, so you can make that argument. You could put someone like Jane Addams here in the Hull House, how she's taking care of children. What other 1800s reforms do we have over here? Temperance. What happens with temperance? Prohibition. What amendment is that? 18th Amendment, right? So a lot of these are echoed in the 1900s in the progressive era. Okay? And then, oh my gosh, post-Reconstruction. So after Reconstruction, more or less, this is our Gilded Age, right? That Gilded Age is in between Reconstruction and even including a little bit of Reconstruction, because our Gilded Age is really going to be from 65 until the Progressive Era, which you could argue is 1900s. So we have the Civil War over here, and we have the Progressive Era over here. And we said this age is just a lot of like our 99 problems, right? We have so many at this time, and it is answered by the Progressive Era. Like Erie catches on fire, Teddy Roosevelt comes up with the Newlands Reclamation Act, right? People are getting cholera and all kinds of terrible things from eating infected food, Food and Drug Act, Meat Inspection Act, right? So these are a lot of our issues. Stuff we talked about in class today with that one essay question, tenement homes, bad stuff for the environment, child labor, Second Industrial Revolution, names like who? Who are our great tycoons? People like Vanderbilt, Carnegie, Pullman, J.P. Morgan. What else at this time? It's a big old scrap of time. So definitely, and again, you guys wanted just this. So the stuff we just talked about with Native Americans in the West belongs in this bracket as well. That's the Indian Wars. The stuff with the settlers and people taking advantage of the Homestead Act, that's going to be mirrored at this time. City growth, Sister Carrie, all that stuff, that's going to be growing at this time. Second wave of immigration, that's going to be at this time. Okay? That's like a 2-second recap of a gigantic chunk of American history. Sound good?
Yeah.
All right, do you guys want to say goodbye to the video?
Goodbye.
Come on, you have to go on the screen.
Oh.
If you would like, as you leave.
It's alright.
Thank you.
Bye, you guys. Take care. Bye, people.